Hello and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Kmet and my co-host is Scott Strasser. Hey, Scott.
Hey, Jason.
So we got a smoky Thursday night here and heading into a big match with Cavalry here. I guess by the time most people will be listening to it, it'll be just in a few hours, I would think.
Yeah, I would think so. We release our episodes on Friday morning and Cavalry's next game is Friday evening. And yeah, like you said, it's a big one.
Well, we'll get to that in a few minutes. But I guess, Scott, what is the YYC Soccer Podcast all about?
We focus on soccer in Calgary at the amateur, collegiate, and professional levels. We talk about the teams and the players from the city's soccer community, from the grassroots and amateur teams up to the university and professional.
This week, we will be talking a fair bit about Cavalry. We'll talk about their match last weekend where they defeated the Wanderers 3-2, and we'll preview the match against York United. And we're also going to talk about Calgary Blizzard, the women's team going to interprovincials, and also a couple mentions about the AMSL championships, which are coming up this weekend. And we also have an interview, Scott. Who's our interview with this week?
Yeah, we had an interview the other day with Musse, the Cavalry attacker. He's had a tremendous impact on the team's offensive productivity since he returned from a fairly lengthy injury layoff. So it was good to hear from him and talk about how and why he's been able to find his feet so quickly after being out for a couple of months.
But let's move on and let's get on to Cavalry FC.
This is Dan Klum, and this is the YYC Soccer Podcast.
Yeah, so last week they were at Spruce Meadows. They're hosting Halifax, and it was a really exciting game, Jason. You and I were both there in person, and it was a 3-2 win for Cavalry. So lots of goals, lots of entertainment.
Yeah, from an entertainment value standpoint, even if you were a neutral in this game, I don't know how you wouldn't have thoroughly enjoyed yourself. Lots of things happening, lots of excitement, and then came down right to the very end of it. Now they were able to survive and got the 3 points, but it was maybe a little bit more tense than maybe they would have liked there in the last moments.
Yeah, definitely. Cavalry was never trailing in this match, but they went ahead and then immediately gave up their lead, as they've been prone to doing this season. And then they managed to build up a cushion. They scored to make it 2-1, and then they scored to make it 3-1. But then they immediately let Halifax back into it by conceding a penalty that Halifax put away. And after that, Wanderers really had the momentum for the last 15 minutes. So there was probably a lot of nail biting going on in the stands. And the Cavalry bench as well, I would have.
Dan Klump got the brace for the Cavs on his birthday, so that was kind of cool. I don't know how many players can really say they've scored a brace on their birthday in their professional soccer career.
Probably not that many, hey? And both goals had Dan Klump written all over them. I mean, I don't know how many headers he scored for Cavalry. It would be interesting to figure that number out, but they were both well taken in the corner. You know, he's such an attacking threat on set pieces and from crosses, and it took him a long time this season to get his first goal, but now he's up to 3 in just a couple of matches. So kudos to him, and yeah, what a great way to celebrate your birthday.
Now we've got this match here coming up Friday evening, and arguably the two teams in the best form in the league right now, although Forge might have something to say about that. But York United and Cavalry are really playing well right now. So it's going to be two hot teams going at it.
Definitely. It feels a bit like a top of the table clash, even though it isn't, because York is in second place and Cavalry is in fourth at the moment. But like you mentioned, both teams are coming in on hot streaks. Cavalry is, having the best form that they've had in 2024. They've won 3 on the bounce now. York is having a similar good run of form. They've been playing really, really well since they got their new head coach, Benjamin Mora, and they're hosting, right? So they're going to try to maintain their run of form. But I'm sure Cavalry, with their reinforcements in attack, and we've talked about Ali Musse, but they also have Maëlle Henry back. They've recently signed Lowell Wright. They've been strong defensively all season. So this should be a really good game. I'm excited to watch it.
Definitely. And one note that I saw Cavalry released a couple days ago, the match time has changed. It's now 6 o'clock Calgary time. I think originally it was supposed to be 5 o'clock. So they did a little bit of adjustment, but anyway, yeah, should be a good one, and looking forward to it. And I guess before we wrap up our Cavalry talk right now, there was a little bit of news with the U Sports players today, as we're recording it on Thursday. A bit of news about the status of those players going forward.
Yeah, we've speculated on how much more Nico Moroniak is going to play this season, considering he is a U Sports draft pick, essentially. But we got a release today from Cavalry called Cavalry FC U Sports Contract Update that basically spelled out that Cavalry is going to retain Moroniak's U Sports rights for the 2025 CPL season. So they'll be able to sign him to a U Sports contract next year without Moroniak needing to re-enter the CPL U Sports draft.
And in addition to that, he is going to stay with the team. He's not going to go back to Mount Royal this fall. So they'll still have him, training with the club and presumably still in the roster when they want him to be. So Moroniak's been a player who's been featured in the 18 a lot. So I think that's probably not going to change too much over the remainder of the season. And I think it's been pretty well earned. He's in his appearances. I think he's done pretty well overall. And it's nice to sort of see that he's going to be sticking around for the rest of the year.
Yeah, and I think Tommy Wilden Jr. would agree with you on that. This is a quote from him in this press release. So I quote, "Nico has shown well and is starting to acclimatize nicely to our training and tactical demands. He has shown some nice moments within the CPL and has promising potential to keep improving. We look forward to helping him grow as a player and person." So pretty nice remarks from the head coach. And yeah, I feel like Moroniak, he doesn't start every game, but he started quite a few, and he's gotten subbed in a couple of times as well. And he's still only 18, right? Congrats to him. You and I predicted before the season got underway that he was going to have a big year, and it looks like he is.
For sure. And it's nice to see another podcast guest flourish. And he was with us in the early part of this year. So, and the other two U Sports players that were on Cavalry's roster, Max Pipegrass, he did make several appearances in the 18 this year. He never actually made it onto the pitch for a match, but he's going to be returning to Cape Breton. But Cavalry has decided to retain his rights for 2025, so he won't go back into the U Sports draft next year either. The third U Sports player Cavalry had was Caden Rogozinski from Mount Royal. He's also returning to his university team, and Cavalry announced that they won't be retaining his rights for next year. So if he wants to re-enter the U Sports draft, he would have that ability to do so in the wintertime.
Yeah, and I quoted Tommy Wilton Jr. from the press release today. I may as well do the same thing for what he said about Caden and Max. So, quote, "Caden and Max provided us great depth in our squad this year, and in return had the experience of training full-time within a professional environment. Both adapted very well to the professional standard and showed great ability and attitude during their time here. We will continue to monitor that within the U Sports environment this season."
I think overall it looks like it was a pretty good U Sports class for the Cavalry this year. And I did want to mention before we moved on to the next topic, there is one more U Sports player with a Calgary connection and a former podcast guest of ours as well, Sebastian Zitkowski, who played for UBC in his U Sports career. He's going to stay with Vancouver FC for the remainder of the season as well. He's not going back to school.
This is Tommy Wilden Jr., and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
Now it's time for our interview with Ali Musse, but we have been having some technical difficulties with the recording of the interview. And as of Friday at noon, we've been able to salvage a few clips of what we talked about. We're hoping to have the entire interview available as a separate mini episode, maybe the next day or so. But anyway, we're going to run clips of us asking Ali a few questions. The first question was talking about the injury and the recovery from it and the return process. The second thing is about mindset, coming back from injury like this. And then the third comment we get from Ali is he explains in detail that second goal he scored in Ottawa and how he put that all together.
Broke my ankle before, and I was thinking that the MRI was catching the previous old injury because of the way I was feeling, and I was just feeling so good. But apparently that was not the case. It was still the injury that was still there. So I came back early to play in the second leg of the Vancouver Whitecaps game. And yeah, I just felt it in the first probably 10, 15 minutes of that game coming into the second half. And it was just, yeah, very difficult. And I just had to see out the game. And then after that, it was excruciating pain. And then I just had to, it kind of sent me back to the beginning of the whole injury process. And yeah, then after that, we didn't want to take any risks or rush the process. And we just waited until it settled down and healed properly and did all the proper rehab and strengthening and stuff. So it took a while to get back, but I'm happy to be back and I feel great right now. And yeah, good to be back on track.
Yeah, I imagine for someone with your playing style, Ali, like an ankle injury must be one of the hardest things to come back from because you rely so much on your agility, your dribbling, your change of pace and direction.
Yeah, 100%. It's probably one of the most difficult. My game revolves around a lot of pivoting and using a lot of change of directions and stuff like that. So it is difficult, but um, yeah, I mean it's also a part of the game. Trusting your abilities to what brought you this far. Just a lot of trust and a lot of just shifting the mindset into the like be going back into being competitive. Uh, so it's a little bit of, I wouldn't say it's difficult, but it's different. It's definitely a different type of mindset. But I think, I don't know, if someone like me, I'm just super competitive and I have a very like high focus when I do certain things. I'm just super like locked in. So I just had to switch my focus back into playing as opposed to like not playing. Which I mean, obviously the transition part is big and crucial, and that's where a lot of our strengthening and our physical trainers and our physios, that's where they kind of help in managing your body and getting yourself ready to compete again. So it's a mixture of obviously the shifting the mindset and also like having the support system around you, like the physios and the physical trainers.
Had a lot of work to do after you stole the ball back on the right touch line there.
Yeah, I mean, I was just I don't know, just after they scored, I don't know, I was kind of like angry in a way, so I just wanted to get a shot off at some point or create another goal scoring opportunity. The ball was in the, I think the center back headed it and the fullback slipped, and then I just kind of pounced on it. I saw a little opening, and I remember Lowell, my teammate, was also kind of around the ball, and I had the momentum after it. I just took my first touch and I pretty much evaded that whole little crowd of the fullback there. And then I think there's a center mid that was also kind of around it. So once I took my first touch out of there, then I'm looking towards the space and I'm driving towards the goal. And then I see two center backs. The first one, thankfully, he kind of like dove in. So I kind of evaded him because he started to a little bit guess that I was going to shoot. Then once that happened, I was pretty much one-on-one with the other center back. And then I just kind of give him a little stutter step and just created some space for myself. And then I said, yo, I'm going to just shoot this. I just believed that I was going to score. And I just smacked it and it went in.
Yeah, it was very much an Arjen Robben inspired goal. That's what it reminded me of. So kudos, that was a great shot.
Thank you.
This is Canadian FIFA assistant referee Mike Barwigan, and this is the YYC Soccer Podcast.
So last weekend, Calgary Blizzard League One Alberta team traveled to Hamilton for the interprovincial championships and played a couple matches. It's a real short tournament, but I think it was a really good learning experience for the team overall. So let's talk a little bit about how that all went down.
Very short tournament. Their first game was on Friday, and it was win and you're in situation against Vancouver Whitecaps to advance to the final on Sunday. Unfortunately, Blizzard, we talked about how strong that Whitecaps team was looking, and Whitecaps came out with a 2-0 win, which meant that Blizzard had to play for third place on Sunday against NDC Ontario. They couldn't score in that match either, and they fell 1-0. So short and not very sweet trip, but like you mentioned, a great learning experience. And we know that this Blizzard team was missing a lot of firepower due to the number of players from the League One team that had gone back to their respective university programs for preseason training camps. So there was a lot of call-ups on this team, and maybe not as much chemistry as the team had at the end of the League One season. So, they were always kind of up against it, but really great opportunity to get to travel to Hamilton and play on Tim Hortons Field.
And before we move on from this topic, I did want to mention there is another Calgary connection in this tournament. Former Blizzard player and current Whitecaps player, Kaylee Hunter from Calgary, she scored both the goals for the Whitecaps in their 2-0 victory in the final for them to clinch the titles. So, she's definitely thriving in that Whitecaps environment right now.
Yeah, and still a very young player, like we've talked about multiple times. I think it's 2008 or 2009 born player. So really great to see her excelling on, such an elite level.
We are going to see a bunch of these Blizzard players back in action this weekend again, a good chunk of them.
Yeah, this weekend we will see the Alberta Major Soccer League Championships taking place in St. Albert for both the men's and women's division. And in that women's division, the final, which is going to be on Sunday morning, will see Calgary Blizzard feature against, I believe, the winner of a semifinal between Edmonton Northwest / St. Albert Impact against Edmonton Drillers.
Yeah, that's my understanding of how this tournament is going to work on the women's side. And when I went through the roster that's been submitted onto the Provincial's website, 14 of the 19 players that traveled to Hamilton are going to be on this side going up to St. Albert for the finals. So,
yeah, and Blizzard was really dominant in the South Division of the AMSL this summer. They finished the regular season with 11 wins, 0 losses, and 2 draws. So unbeaten season. And a plus 33 goal differential. So they walked over the rest of the teams in the South Division, put their dominance into perspective. Calgary Callies United finished second with 4 wins, 7 losses, and a tie. So a full 22 points behind Blizzard. And they just had a plus 1 goal differential. So Blizzard really had an easy time in their division.
And on the men's side, there's going to be a total of 4 teams on the men's side this weekend in St. Albert, but there's only one Calgary representative appearing.
Yeah, and this is that Blizzard Dinos mashup. They finished second in the South Division behind Lethbridge FC with a 6-5-2 record. So 6 wins, 5 losses, 2 draws. They're going to be taking on Edmonton Scottish on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, and Scottish was in first place in the North Division. So we'll watch that one as well with great interest and see what kind of updates we get from St. Albert. But yeah, a couple teams with Blizzard connections are representing Calgary up there this weekend.
I like how you put down this in our notes for this episode, Jason. But on the women's Drillers team, there's also a Calgary connection with a couple of players who had played for Foothills WFC.
Yeah, May Zaksko and Tori Martin are both playing for Drillers in this tournament. A couple of familiar names on one of the Edmonton teams.
So the AMSL championships aren't the only big tournaments happening in the Edmonton area this weekend. We know that Canada Soccer's Player Development Program, or PDP, has its U17 and U15 cups for both boys and girls happening in Edmonton.
Yeah, and there are representatives from BC, Alberta, Quebec, and Ontario. And there's definitely some Calgary representation in all 4 of these tournaments.
Yeah, Foothills Soccer Club is really well represented. They have teams in the U17 boys and girls tournaments, as well as the U15 boys and girls tournaments. And then other than Foothills, there's a Rangers team competing in the U17 boys tournament, as well as the U17 girls tournament, and then a Villains team, Calgary Villains team in the U15 boys tournament.
Yeah, so best of luck to all those teams, and we'll keep an eye on that as well and provide an update next week.
This is Izzy Monk, and welcome to YYC Soccer Podcast.
All right, I thought we'd finish our episode off this week, Jason, with just a quick mention, an update on Calgary's connections to the University of Memphis Tigers women's team, which we've talked a lot about how many players from Calgary have come through that program, including Maya Jones, Grace Storty, former podcast guests, and another former podcast guest who is still with the team is Isabel Monk, who opened her account for the season tonight, scoring in Memphis Tigers' 5-1 win over Alabama A&M.
Yeah, so that's a pretty solid start to the season for her. And the other thing to mention about the Calgary connections to University of Memphis, Top Drawer Soccer, which I'm not sure how familiar many of our listeners are with this, but it's basically a website which all it talks about is college soccer in the States. It is sort of the leading authority news source for college soccer in the NCAA. And they came up with a list of the top 100 women's players in the NCAA this year as of preseason. And they ranked Anna Hauer 50th overall, and I believe that she was the highest ranked Canadian. So kudos to her. You know, I think everyone is kind of expecting her to have a big sophomore season. And it's certainly worth the mention. Another former podcast guest and someone who's building themselves a nice career for sure.
Yeah, good for her. I'm trying to see if she played or scored in this game tonight. But we know that she featured a lot last year in her rookie season. So yeah, probably lots of expectations to have a really strong second year for the Tigers.
Yeah, I think the only thing that's going to slow her down in her NCAA career this year is that there's a very good chance she's going to end up playing for Canada in the U20 World Cup, which that's all going to start happening here in the next couple of weeks. We'll be talking about it when it comes up. But you know, she was with at the last U20 camp, so.
Yeah, and I know the Tigers placed Anna Hauer on their preseason watch list, along with Momo Nakao and Valerie Seto. So the team itself is probably expecting big things from her.
Definitely. And actually, one more thing I'll mention, which I just thought of right now, is that Mila Schneider with University of Maine has been listed as a defender to watch in sort of from an award standpoint by an organization which is kind of involved with the NCAA awards. Every year they put out a list of players of players to watch at various positions. And that's, for example, like Maya Jones was on that list last year when she was in her senior year in Memphis. Kudos for making that list. And besides talking about University of Memphis, there's a lot of Canadian content on the University of Maine. So we're going to be talking a lot more NCAA, U Sports, post-secondary soccer here very quickly. So we'll dive much deeper into this stuff in the near future.
Yeah, I'm really excited to cover post-secondary soccer this fall. I really enjoy that level. And I know the youth sports season is right around the corner. I think one more weekend until regular season action gets underway. But of course, school sports and school in general and in the U.S. seems to always start a few weeks beforehand. And yeah, the NCAA season is up and running. And if you don't, I'd recommend following, especially the Twitter accounts for these two programs in particular, Memphis and Maine. Memphis's highlights of their game today, they look really good. I mean, they had a great season last year. I don't know how good this team that they beat 5-1 is, really, but they look like a well-drilled unit already.
Thank you for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can have this podcast downloaded to your device as soon as it becomes available by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or other platforms. Check out our website at yycsoccer.com, where you can look through our episode archive and find other options to listen, including our new YouTube channel. We also have links to buy Scott's book online. You can leave a question or comment in the Contact Us section of our website. You can also interact with us on social media such as Twitter and Instagram, where our username is YYC Soccer 403. Thanks for listening.